41 people with alleged ties to organized crime were subpoenaed for questioning about recent gang fighting.
The FBI estimates that Greg Scarpa is responsible for taking out, it said, like between 100 and 120 people. Do you think that's high or low or accurate?
Here's the thing. He told me he stopped counting at 50. That's what he told me. If I had a guess, I'd say 100 is easy.
You mentioned John Gotti a second ago. What was the feeling on the street at that time about John Gotti?
There's some guys that idolized him, you know, because he had that way about him. He was very egotistical, he was brash, he was arrogant. Then there's others like the Chin and Junior Persico that were never going to forgive him for killing a boss. When I was on the Gotti documentary, okay, I didn't have a lot of nice things to say because I was honest. They asked me a question, wasn't John a great guy? I says, what do you mean by that? I says, none of us were great guys. So I'm not sure who I'm talking to on TV here, but I'm not going to tell the public he was a great guy. So I spent 3 or 4 days on this show. And because John Gotti Jr. and he's smart, got executive producer rights. So he was able to cut what he didn't want in there.
Yeah.
So it came out to make it was a canonization of his father to make him a saint. All these years later, and he knows what he did. He broke some rules himself and had some conversations you shouldn't have with people. So he's not high and mighty above me in any way, shape, or form.
Between two factions of the Colombos.
Yo, shadow creeping, see him lurking. Feds be chirping. Underneath the city, rats be murking. Schemes stay working. Heard that whisper, cold wind. Another chapter gotta spend. American made. Yeah, we got it. American made. From shadows deep, American made. Pay the piper, American made. Grim Reapers hustle, always on the clock. Tick tock. Colombo's grip, concrete block, never stop. Mafia war, another day, gotta get away. But shadows grow, can't outrun what's already done. American made. Yeah, we got it, American made. From shadows deep, American made. Pay the piper, American made.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for checking out American Made. Today, I'm excited to welcome back to the channel a returning guest. He was a made man in the Colombo crime family and was the right-hand man to the Grim Reaper, Greg Scarpa. He survived a Mafia war, went to prison, and wrote a book titled The Life. And I'm excited to welcome him back to the channel. My guest is Larry Mazza. Larry, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I thank you for inviting me back. I enjoyed the first show. Very professional, and I'm more than happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We're glad to have you. So to start with, we briefly spoke about a website that you have right now. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that a little bit and explain what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I'd like to. Last time we were together, we spoke about, trying to maybe set an example for younger kids today. And I know a lot of my friends from the past are doing that in different ways. But I feel a little uncomfortable doing that because I never want to come off like a hypocrite. If that's not too hard of a, too deep of a word to use, because I never feel that way. But I always said to kids or whoever, you don't need that life. You don't need a gang life to get respect and be successful. As a matter of fact, it's not the easy way out. It's a hard way out. The easy way out is to go to school and learn and do things become an expert at something, and that's helped me when I came home from prison. One of the things, for instance, is I was in the gambling business, practically my whole life. So one of my producers, well, my main producer, Joe Paletto, had been following the things that I learned about the business, and he opened up a website for me called InsideStraight.com, where I'm able to share the expertise, the information, the different people that I've dealt with over the years who are very professional, and they win. They win a lot more than the average gambler. So we have that website, like I said, InsideStraight.com, and I do blogs. I do what do you call them? Podcasts. We did some stuff on Instagram, and we're constantly promoting it. It's growing, and it's a very useful tool for those who want to gamble, and it's becoming successful. I have a gym. When I came home, I started working in a gym. I developed many clients. I have a bit of a martial arts background, and anything I did in life, any sport I played, including martial arts, I was good. Some of the sports I was better than good, like basketball. They thought I was going to be the next Larry Bird at one point when I was a kid. But you know how difficult that is. But I was always good at the sports and athletics and coaching, so I kept that in my life. Eventually, I wound up opening a gym, which I have. It's a big fitness center. We have an outdoor section on the river. We have a dojo. We have a weight room. We have a machine room. It's a very big gym, and I have a bunch of trainers that work for me now or work with me. Practically runs itself. My wife and I had a supper club that started when she retired. She opened up a florist. And what we did was, because there's a lot of empty space in a florist that's unnecessary. It looks pretty with flowers all around and everything. So we added a wine bar. And the ladies in the neighborhood started hanging out there. Then we added a little bit of music. Next thing you know, we were packed with couples coming sitting in there, listening to the music, sipping wine. We needed a bigger place. Opened up, and it became a full-blown supper club, full liquor license, entertainment every night. And just by luck, somebody came in and wanted to buy it from us. And, we got tired of it. It's a tough business to run. And after, I guess, about 10 years in it, we sold it. It was just before the pandemic. So that was a silver lining, too, because it would have been tough to conduct business with that. So I've got a lot of good things going on. And, it's 65, semi-retired, but I still oversee all these things. One of my entertainers, Carlos Carr, plays locally, and I'm sort of a manager to him. I don't ask for anything. I just do it for him because of the experience I had from the supper club, and we're going to go see him tonight, as a matter of fact. So I got a lot of good stuff going on, and the past is just what it is. It's way in the rearview mirror.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad that you came back and we were able to get together to kind of focus on some of those really cool things that you've done since that life. But just to go back a little bit, like I said, we spoke before and really got in depth with your early years around the Colombo family. Right. But I'll include that link so people can go back and check that out. But just to go back, can you talk a little bit about how you were introduced to organized crime, and then talk about becoming so close with the Grim Reaper, Greg Scarpa?
Yeah, well, we talked about it, like you said, on the first one, and I'll bring it up again quickly. I don't want to get into all the detail because I think that
just briefly, so people kind of understand.
Yeah, I was a kid on a straight and narrow path, good kid in school, had several jobs. One of the jobs, I met an older woman that we wound up having an affair together, and as we got closer and closer, she wanted me to meet what was her husband. And obviously that was a tough thing for me. It took many, many months, probably 6 months to a year before I even said I would consider that. But certain circumstances led to me say, okay, I'll meet him. Actually, the circumstance was I was going to be the sales manager for a company they were opening. And it came at a good time because the fire department list that I was very high on, and I would have been called within months, went into the courts, and it was the test was deemed unfair to minorities and women. So it was put off for 2 years, and then the judge ruled and set it up for another 2 years. Long story short, I took this job with the supply company. I got to know her husband, who's Greg Scarpa, the Grim Reaper, and I obviously, being his sales manager, I would have to go to his club every day, and I got to know him better, and we got to become very close. Ultimately, he told people I was his right-hand man and that I was the best friend he ever had in the life. So that's how close we got. And we got so close that there was a point where he knew that I was getting very, very uneasy and I didn't feel right about what was going on with me and Linda. And at some point, again, I don't know exactly when, I can only guess, she told him and they had a discussion. And ultimately, he sat me down and told me he was okay with it as long as just the three of us would know. Otherwise, him and I would be killed. And let me say this, he already had 2 other wives. So this was his 3rd and youngest wife. And then I found out later on he had a 4th woman in his life with a kid. So he had, one of the attorneys said he was like a swashbuckler. He had women all over the place and families. So in a strange way, I made his life easier. And as close as we got, I guess it was better than maybe her going out to nightclubs or whatever to do something while he was gone. And he was gone a lot. So anyway, that's how I got in. And ultimately, the sales company literally blew up in flames. And to this day, I don't know if it was an insurance job or he just got fed up or he wanted the big check, the instant gratification. And there was no more supply company. So he brought me into some of the rackets, the low-level rackets, like numbers. And then I saw that a good place to pick up numbers was where gamblers are. OTB, off-track betting, the horse parlors, bowling alleys, things like that. And on my own, pretty much, I started booking now horses and sports, and it grew to a very large scale where I ultimately had a good part of the Colombo family coming through me. And I dealt with all the families. I got very big at a young age, 21, 22 years old. I had one of the biggest businesses in probably the country. If you have one of the biggest ones in New York, it's probably as big as any in the country.
Yeah.
That's how the doors open. Now I got in, and when you're in it, you can be like a big percentage of the guys that are there because their fathers brought them in, their uncles brought them in. They really never proved themselves. Other big type of guys that were big in the businesses and making fortunes, got their button just because of that. They probably never held a gun in their life. Like Gambino's had 2 sons that were huge in the garment industry, making millions and millions of dollars. They were good fellas. There's no way they ever held a gun in their life. And the Colombo family had a few too. Every family has it. The bookmaker I learned from became a good fella later on. And he was the nicest guy, docile, and just there was no way he was a shooter. But he did kill somebody later on in a fist fight. So, and he did some time. But yeah, so it's what I'm leading to is I didn't want to be known as one of those guys. So if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. And he saw I passed all the tests, and eventually I was on several beatings with him, his son, the crew, ultimately several murders, whether it was driving the car, giving a guy a flat, backup shooter, co-shooter, main shooter. It's just a growing thing, and it takes years. And then when the war came, believe it or not, it wasn't that many years I was around, 8 years, 9 years, and the trouble started. So I was seasoned. Most of the guys in Gregory's crew were doing time. A lot of Greg's crew were now in different areas because a lot of them got straightened out. Some of them wound up on the other side. So I was looked to by Greg to step up during the war. And Jimmy and I, my partner Jimmy, who I could just talk about every step of the way because he was there with me. I don't always bring him up, just unnecessary, but people that know the life and know us know the two of us were, during that war, Greg's most trusted and lethal guys. But we grew into that role. That's what happens.
Right. Yeah, it's a fascinating story how you were kind of brought in to that life and how that developed. The FBI estimates that Greg Scarpa is responsible for taking out, it said, like between 100 and 120 people. Do you think that's high or low or accurate?
Here's the thing. He told me he stopped counting at 50. That's what he told me once. When I got close to him, I could ask him things like that. How much money do you have? And one time I asked him that, and he told me if I piled my money up and you climbed to the top and jumped off, you'd die. So I got, so I asked him that. He said, I stopped counting at 50. Then I heard from, and don't forget, I was around before the war started, probably, I'll just say around 12. I've said 24, I said 18, somewhere in that area that I was privy to and part of to some extent, even a small extent. But I knew, and you're culpable. Once they bring you in on it, it's part of that grooming and educating and getting you ready for the next step. So I was around a lot of them. Then during the war, there's probably another 6 hits that we were involved in. Tons of shootouts and things like that, injuries. He told me he's done dozens off the record. I've heard from other people 100. One FBI agent said he might have 200. Now, you got to realize he goes back to probably definitely the 50s, where he was a gangster. And same thing with him. If he was under Profaci and Profaci knew he was capable and he had balls like of steel, he probably put him on almost every hit that they were doing. So who knows how many that was back in the day. Them, when he had his own crew. So it's hard to say, and it doesn't really matter. If I had a guess, I'd say 100 is easy. That's my guess, because like it says, in my little short time, there's a lot. So who knows from before, who knows what he didn't tell me,
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little context on who Greg Scarpa was and how much of a heavyweight he was in that life.
Well, that's why he's called the Grim Reaper down the road.
Right.
He wasn't always called the Grim Reaper. That came during the war, but it was a good fitting nickname.
Yeah. So you're getting involved in the life. You're next to Greg Scarpa, and he is loyal to the boss of the family, Junior Persico.
Right.
Can you talk about what splintered the family and led to the Colombo War?
Yeah, well, it's funny because we have. I'll just allude to this. We and I'll get to the answer. I wrote a book about the life, and I'll say this now. If anybody wants to see it, they can get it at www.larrymazza-thelife.com. Okay. That book has gone to a lot of places. It's gone to De Niro and Scorsese, got me hired as a consultant for The Irishman.
Yeah, I want to get into that here in just a minute.
Yeah, I got to play a hitman in The Irishman. I was in another show where I played a corrupt ex-cop suspected of murder in Las Vegas, and the corrupt ex-cop was working for Tony Spilatro, who was Joe Pesci's character in Casino. So that was a real story. So the book opened a lot of things for me, because just recently we have a couple of different things we're working on. There's several scripts written for episodics. One was done by Terry Winter. We have backups in case he's not going to be involved, because he's very tight on the Tulsa King right now, and we don't want to waste any time. So we have a script written for that. We also have a script written for a movie on the Colombo War. So it's funny you just asked that, and I remember I'm writing it, So what started it was when Junior Persico got the 130 years, and all the other close guys, Jerry Lang, and all the guys he was real close to at the top end of that family, all got put away, scabby, forever. He had to pick somebody to act on his behalf. Even though he's going away for 130 years and he's never going to see the street again, he doesn't have to step down. Some people say he should have. Valid argument. But he doesn't have to. And he didn't. He wanted to maintain control, probably to hold it for his son, who was going to get out of jail someday. And that's not even a fact, because his son told me we would have left Vic there. I would have had probation and whatever. If Vic would have behaved himself, he could have kept the position. But Vic was weak, okay? People want to argue, well, he's doing life, this and that. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean he's a stronger man. You know, he chose that because he has probably a fortune in business. He doesn't want to have to rat on his kids, which I understand. There's reasons for everything, okay? But in that context of being the boss, he was weak. He listened to guys like John Gotti, Vinny Alloy, Wild Bill Catola, Joe Scopo, and all those guys had an axe to grind with Junior Persico. So they built him up thinking they were powerful and he should take the position officially. So he put his consigliers out there to poll the captains. Now, there's 3 ways a boss is not a boss. He steps down, he dies, or all the captains vote him out unanimously, which is impossible, because the first thing a boss does is put his closest friends, his family, his cousins, his son, makes them all captains. They're not all going to turn on him. It's just not going to happen. It's never going to happen. So he had the original consigliere, Jimmy Angelina, go poll the captains. When he came back and it didn't work out, Vic had Jimmy killed and got a message to Junior Persico, who he's acting on behalf, saying that Jimmy tried to take over the family, which was a lie. He was trying to take over the family. But this is how the backstabbing goes. Then he brings in Carmine Sessa, who was very tight with Greg. He grew up under Greg. He makes him the consigliere. Now he tells him to do the same thing. When he comes to Greg, Greg tells him he's going to do the same thing to you he did to Jimmy, the last consigliere. He says, you can't go to poll the captains. It looks like there's a break in the family. Mm. So Carmine makes another mistake. He puts a weak crew together and he decides to go kill Vicarina. Okay? They pull up, when I say weak, they pull up, Vic spots them. And instead of getting out of the car and blasting them, or saying, Vic, we need to talk to you, and go blast them, even if he ran away, you should have chased him down in the car. You cannot miss that hit. They ran away because they were spotted. That was the official act that started the war, because Vic was able to go to the other families. He was able to go to his people and say, they're trying to kill me. When meanwhile, he was the one that started the whole war. So now there's a split, and he sends out a message. Anybody on person that doesn't come over to our side is going to be considered a rebel, and they're dead. So we had to get our people together, and we put it out that they were rebels. Eventually, we put the family together on our own, without the rebels. And a shooting war developed, everybody knows. And it became bloody, and I'm pretty much calling it something like this, The War to End All Wars, as a subtitle. Yeah. Because the whole structure of Cosa Nostra is not the same anymore. And that's part of it, between that and guys like John Gotti and Gas Pipe just being lunatics and egotistical and taking over and selling drugs, and just totally every rule was broken. Every rule, not only omerta, every rule was broken. So it'll never be the same. But that's what started the war. His ego and his weakness.
Gotcha. Now, are you proposed at this time to be straightened out?
I was proposed way before the war. When I say that, 2 years, 3 years. And Carmine Sessa, the consigliere, brought it to Vic. And what happened, this was part of what Greg knew. Greg was hearing things because, let's not forget, he had the FBI in his pocket. So he was hearing things. And one of the things he heard was that Vic was aligning all the power in Long Island where he was. And he wasn't straightening out guys in Brooklyn. So there was going to be a night where we were going to go in, and Carmine didn't go. He thought he was getting paranoid. He thought we were going to be killed at that ceremony. And when he came back and told Greg that, Greg was furious with him that he got that, because now he was getting weak. You're consul, yeah. They're going to whack you with a Sarah. Come on. What are you watching TV? Too much. So Jimmy and I, and also another fella, his name's Joe. He was also proposed. I don't know whatever happened with him, if he ever got in or not. But then during the war, when we split and we put out on record that this was our family, there was a vote that we put Joe T at the top. He picked Jojo Russo as his underboss. Carmine Sessa remained consigliere. At that meeting, the first time ever, Greg Sr., the Grim Reaper, was promoted to captain, official captain. The reason was there was also a vote that me and Jimmy should continue being at every meeting. We were there, and we are at every meeting. We were on every hit. We did more than all of them put together. So none of them were going to say we didn't deserve to be there. They all put it to a vote that we should get straightened out. We were brought after that meeting into a restaurant at the Meadowlands Sheraton at the time. I think it's a Hyatt now or something else. And I went back there years later with my wife. I showed her the table that we sat at in the back. And Jimmy and I were officially brought in to what we called the family. Okay, it was our family. It was the Colombo family. Junior Persico had to okay it. And he sent a message back through his brother Teddy. These were his exact words. Get those two guys recognized. We were already part of everything. So, and it was just a matter of time. But no, to answer, I was proposed earlier on because of the split and Vic's idea of taking over the family. It didn't happen when it should have happened. And the reason Greg really wanted it to happen was because he was dying of AIDS. His son was doing 20 years. And Jimmy and I were the last two from the old crew that he trusted, and he didn't want to lose the empire, especially when Greg came home 20 years later, his son. He wanted somebody to hold the fort. Because up to that point, Jimmy and I said, we were, every FBI agent you talked to said we were under the radar. We were smart. We didn't hang out there when they were selling drugs. We opened our own club. We were pretty low key, and I liked that. And we didn't really need to do anything. As long as Greg and Greg Jr. were around, why did we need that extra legal thing against us? But when they went away, when he went away, and Greg, I knew was going to die, and we did all we did during the war, I says, nobody's going to take what's ours. They're not going to take what me and Jimmy built. So that's really the whole reason it happened. That's how it happened. And I'll say this too. Let me say something to you too. I already had, again, not because I'm some Al Capone, I had more respect than probably 75% of the guys in the life. Because by the time I was growing up, a lot of it was nepotism. Is that the word? Where it's family oriented. Bring my cousin in and make him a good fella, even if he didn't earn his way. I was Greg's right-hand man. So I had a lot of respect. And there's a lot of good fellas, even though they got a button, they'll never be respected. They'll never be liked. They'll never be looked up to, whether they're just losers or thugs, they can't earn. There's a lot of reasons. So, nobody waves a magic wand over you or sprinkles moon dust and says, oh, you're special. You are what you are.
Gotcha. You mentioned John Gotti a second ago. Out of curiosity, what was the feeling on the street at that time about John Gotti? He was arrested in 1990 and then convicted in 92. How did guys on the street feel about him?
Well, there's probably a split. There's some guys that idolized him, because he had that way about him. He was very egotistical. He was brash. He was arrogant. Then there's others like the Chin and Junior Persico that were never going to forgive him for killing a boss. That's a major rule. That's probably the number one rule not to break it. He just broke it. And a lot of lower key guys didn't like him, including in his own family. We heard it all the time. Guys like Joe Piney, Gallo, who was an old consigliere, some of the DeChicos that were friends with us on Bath Avenue because I had my pool room there. They always talked derogatory of him. They said he's going to bring us down. But if you were somebody aspiring or wanted somebody to look up to, then you idolized them, you know. But so I'll say it was 50-50. The guys that mattered with brains and businesses and wanted to be under the radar and have a good life, they didn't like his ways. But the guys that were aspiring, you know, thugs in the street that really only way they could make money is to hand a bag of cocaine to another guy and pick up $10,000. They couldn't really run a business, you know, and they're the rackets of businesses. They're not easy to run, you know. None of them were ever going to be in the unions. So I don't know. I was, you know, was he a tough guy? Absolutely. You know, there's no doubt about that. But he also came up under Anello Della Croce, Neil Della Croce. Everybody knows that. I would think everybody knows that name. And I think he was a savior for him, because what I heard was Greg was I'm Greg. John was a drug dealer at a young age, and he was in a gang that sold drugs. That's where he committed murders. When he got pulled in by Neil, I don't think he was on as many hits as people would think, because he was really protected now by Neil. And he rose quickly, and now he got in a position to order it, you know. And there's a lot of guys that fall into that. They get in a position where they can now order hits, and they never did them themselves. They never really felt what it took to take life. And now here they are, whack them, put them to sleep, kill them because they think he may be a rat, you know. Yeah. It became very easy to kill, and that was a bad thing for the life.
Gotcha. I saw in an interview, you said that you met John Gotti Jr. one time in a club. You didn't say a whole lot about it, but it sort of seemed like the two of you didn't get along. Can you talk about what happened?
We didn't get to know each other well enough to even like each other or not. But I saw right away he had the aura of being John's son, and he could walk into the place, and you know, and listen, he was John's son, so he does have the aura. Most of, you know, but he wasn't the little bit I saw and talked or whatever. I could see he wasn't my type of guy. Years later, you may be mistaking it for this. When I was on the Gotti documentary, okay, I didn't have a lot of nice things to say because I was honest. When they asked me a question, wasn't John a great guy? I says, what do you mean by that? I says, none of us were great guys. You know, I probably says my father was a lieutenant in the fire department for 25 years. That's a great guy. You know, another guy's father, that's an attorney or whatever. I says, we weren't great guys. I said, so I'm not sure who I'm talking to on TV here, but I'm not going to tell the public he was a great guy. They cut that out. They cut a lot of things like that. What I talked about with people in the life, half of them didn't like him. They cut that out. So I spent 3 or 4 days on this show. And because John Gotti Jr. and he's smart. He got executive producer rights. So he got a sign off. So he was able to cut what he didn't want in there.
Yeah.
So it came out to make it was a canonization of his father to make him a saint. And when I went to the grand opening or the premiere, I was invited by the producers, the other producers, and I went. He was in there, and one of his bodyguards, who I didn't get along with at the time, was there also. And I won't get into details, but he came over to me, and I was very, very arrogant and almost, what's the word, malicious? Or, yeah, I guess that's it. Or if you're looking for trouble, there's another word for it. But whatever it was, I know I was. And the reason, I didn't realize it at the time, but when he was walking over, he actually extended his hand to shake my hand and say hello. And I didn't realize that.
This is Junior?
No, his bodyguard.
Oh, bodyguard. Okay.
And I some Russian guy, I forget his name. So I got like my hair stood up when I saw him coming towards me. And I had a few people there with me, some friends, and even my son was there. And I didn't realize that they came up behind me when they saw me getting in a position. Like, I didn't know why this guy was walking towards me. And they asked me afterwards, why did you talk to him? Why were you so mad at him? And I didn't realize it. I was sort of like back in the old day, you know. And he said he wanted to shake your hand. But John was in there, and he could have came over. He didn't come over and say anything. You know, maybe that's what I was talking about. And I says, you know, all these years later, and he knows what he did. He broke some rules himself and had some conversations he shouldn't have with people. So he's not high and mighty above me in any way, shape, or form. He could have came and said hello, but his bodyguard was coming over. And again, I forget his name, but it was a Russian name. And there's a word, I wish I could think of it. Not really malicious, but whatever. You get the idea.
Yeah.
I was ready. I thought, I didn't think it was going to be friendly. And I think he didn't have anything on his mind. So if he's watching for that, I apologize.
Yeah, I was just curious. I don't remember where I saw that at. I write all
Belligerent.
types of notes down and stuff, and I just had that wrote down. So I'm not sure what
But
video.
belligerent is the word.
Belligerent. Yeah,
I
okay.
think I was a little belligerent. Like, normally I'm not that way.
That's interesting. I've heard you tell a story that you got into a beef with Gambino boss Paul Castellano's nephew. What was that over?
It was in an after hours. So right there, you know what caused it. Too much booze. I didn't know who he was. I had no clue. It was over a girl. It's so long ago, I can't give you the details inside really what happened. It was over a girl, and I was there with friends, and what was I going to do? I had to go outside with him. We went outside, and I had the upper hand, and I won. I didn't overdo it. Once I had gotten ahead of the game, I ended it quick. You know, I mean, I wasn't vicious. I didn't have to, you know, kick his teeth in and take his eyes out like some people like to do. And it was over until a meeting was called in the middle, you know, late at night that I had to go to because it was Paul's nephew. And, you know, again, I didn't know that. And that's what saved me, so to speak, you know. But Greg, to his credit, at that meeting, he made a comment because Paul was really looking for some kind of satisfaction, whatever that meant. And Greg had no right saying this because he wasn't on the level. As a matter of fact, Scarpa was there, who was the acting boss of our family at the time. And he had to stop Greg. Greg told him if a hair is harmed on his head, you'll see more bodies in the street. And Scarpa had put his hand up. Greg, let me handle this. At the end of the day, it was actually an act. Now I owed Scarpa my life because Paul made a comment to that effect. Thank that man you're still alive today. You know, so you're going to kill me over a barroom fight? I was 19 maybe 20 if that old. You know, it was really stupid. But this is what happens in the life. You know, that's why Greg never liked us going out to clubs. No, forget it about after hours. He hated when his son opened the bar. You know, he opened up a bar and there was more trouble in there. That's, you know, so, you know, you could see it. I understood, but I don't think it should have gone as far as it went. It really shouldn't have. And the funny thing was, Sammy the Bull was outside. And when I came out after the thing was over, Sammy, I knew him fairly well from different gyms and things like that. He was older than me. He was already, I don't think he was a skipper yet, but I know he was already in with the Gambino, you know, a wise guy. And we used to play racquetball together and things like that. As I was walking by to leave, he goes like this, "You should have killed the cocksucker." They already didn't like the Castellanos. I didn't know any better, but anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. So during this Colombo war that's going on, guys are being shot on both sides.
Yep.
You were right in the mix of all this and played a vital role in a hit on a guy named Nikki Black. Can you just talk a little bit about this hit that went down?
Yeah, that was ultimately probably up to that point the biggest hit in the war because he was going to take over. Vic's named him consigliere once Carmine split, and Carmine stayed with Persico. He's still the official consigliere, But at some point when the war was won and whatever, he planned on making Nikki Black his consigliere. Joe Scopo was already the underboss, who later on got killed when I was in prison. And that is arguably the biggest hit now. But at the time, Nikki Black's hit sent shockwaves through the arena faction. There were breaks. People started coming over to our side. They were begging to end it. Of course, it happened right around the holiday, right after the holidays, like January 3rd or something like that. And what happened was he sent a message to my Uncle Albert, who was under him for many, many years. And somebody else in the club also heard it and told Carmine, our consigliere, Carmine Sessa, that if me and my partner Jimmy don't come over to his side, he's going to kill us. So my uncle called me. I went to his house that night, and I remember him telling me, he would never raise a hand. He would never, ever hurt me. And he looked me in the eye and said, Butchie, that's what my nickname was. Don't you ever forget, blood is thicker than water. He says, this is what he said, and I want you to be careful. He says, you have nothing to worry about with me. As a matter of fact, if there's anything I can do, and I know what he meant. So I says, just let me know where we can find him. Those may not be verbatim, but those words, I understood what he meant, and I says, yep, we'll take any help we can get, something like that. Lucky enough, I think a couple of days later, a day, 2 days later, and it's funny, we had a truce for Christmas and New Year's, and John Gotti had asked that the shooting stop because his trial was starting. And Greg says, F him, mind his business, has nothing to do with our family. He can't tell us that. So we already made Nikki Black our #1 target for the threat. And as luck has it, like I says, within 2 days, we're driving around Avenue, our usual circle that we do, but that was the first one of the day. We're parked there. I got my binoculars out. We have the car set up like with coffee cups with a scanner in there. So we look like surveillance, like we're cops, if anybody notices us. Baseball hats on. We spot him. I spot him through the binoculars. I say, that's Nikki Black. Greg says, where? Let's get him. Just like that. He was on and off the phone a lot, which is in court documents a lot because there's a good chance he was talking to his FBI contact. And if I had known who he was talking to for sure, I would say it, but he was on that phone a lot during the day. And it could have been him. We found out later, which makes it look like he was talking to his agent, that there was 4 or 5 surveillance cars following Nikki Black that day. And at that moment, they all got called back to headquarters. So they drove away while we were driving up towards him. And he started driving. He circled around the block. We followed. As soon as he pulled over, we pulled up alongside of him. At this point, I had my sunglasses on. I had a bandana on. I had that baseball hat, and I picked up a bandana. We pulled up alongside of him, and I had a shotgun. I was ready for him. Greg had a rifle. Unfortunately, he was losing it a little bit in his mind. He hit the wrong button, the safety. The bullets came out instead of taking the safety off. But I was already leaned out the window. I put the shotgun, 6 inches or less right behind his ear, and the rest is history. Some of the pellets hit the other guy in the car and the guy that was bringing money to the car. His pellets were flying all over. But he was done right there. We drove off, and it was, like I said, it was a hit that we thought would end the war. But these guys were in too deep. Most of them felt they could never be forgiven, and they would all be dead anyway. And the truth is, some of them could never be forgiven, like Vic Arena, Wild Bill, Vinny Alloy. These guys did it a few times. They went against Carmine, so he was never going to forgive it again.
Right. You mentioned Joey Scopo was taken out. Eventually, Vic Arena was taken off the street. How did the war conclude? What ended the war?
Well, after Joey Scopo got killed, and then Alley Boy was out, which is Junior's son, who was supposedly the heir apparent who was going to take it over. I don't know any details of this other than he got convicted of also luring Billy Catola, Wild Bill, one I said that could never get a pass, that came in and they killed him. So really, there was no power, no heavyweights left on the other side. And they were offered a chance to come back where they belonged. And they all came running. And there was, a new alignment. Different guys got put in positions. There were a lot of guys that, were never even heard of or never even did nearly the amount of work that the previous guys have done that became good fellas and captains and different positions. But that was the beginning of the end because it just wasn't the same anymore. But they did try to put it together again. Then Alley Boy went away. I guess he's got life. There's one Persico left that may be running things. I don't know. Some other big names, a guy named Joe that, did time and he got shot during the war. And there's rumors that he may be up at the top. Then there's guys that really were court jesters during the war that supposedly street bosses now, and I'm not mentioning their names because it's unnecessary. They know who they are. But I really don't know. It just, to me, it seems like a dead end. You get out of prison, stop going back to that life. There's nothing there. There's no loyalty. There never was. It's just a matter of pulling the knife out of your own back and sticking it in somebody else's. That's the way the life is. It's unfortunate. But anybody that doesn't see that is not the smartest, not the brightest bulb in the chandelier.
Yeah, and so you eventually get arrested and end up in prison with a lot of these guys from the Arena faction. How was that?
Well, there's some guys that put on separation for some reasons. Like there were certain guys on my own side, they wouldn't let us be together. Later on, even me and Jimmy, they would never put us together. I couldn't be around a bunch of guys. I was with guys from the other side, but not all of them. But the government works in funny ways. I was with Vic Arena at one point. Okay, I came in on the 11 South. They put me on that floor. Again, with all these separations, he's the number one target. Why do you put me on the floor with him? Okay. The first thing he did when he came over to me was put his hand out and he literally apologized for causing this problem. And he hoped I could put the animosity behind me. And I said, I'm only interested in winning this case and getting our lives back. I says, nothing else. So we were okay. I went through the same thing with another guy, Patty Amato, who was a skipper on his side. The night I got arrested, the night I came back to MCC after my 2 weeks in a county jail in Florida, he said the same thing to me. And he told me sorry. So, oh my God, I'm happy to hear that, lad, because I was on the elevator with Greg. They put us on the same elevator. They're both cuffed. He says, Greg went after him trying to bite him. So this is the difference. I said, no, I'm not thinking that way. Anyway, the problem was I'm on that floor for a couple of weeks, and I saw that Vic Arena was paying to use the phone. So I sort of lost even more respect for him for that. Then he calls me in one day with the underboss of the Lucchese family and somebody else, a friend of mine, Mike, from the Lucchese family, who was a good fella. They bring me in the bathroom, and they tell me that they hear a rumor that Greg's a rat. So I went after Vic. I couldn't stand there and let him call Greg a rat.
Yeah.
The other two guys got between and stopped me. So I moved my bed. I went on the other side. I wouldn't stay near him anymore after hearing that. Unfortunately, within a day or two, it came out that Greg stood in front of the judge and admitted everything he did and that he was hoping to go home. I did a lot for this government. He said things that were just, that my heart came out of my chest. And funny how the government moved me real quick. And just before that, before I was with Vic, I was on the floor with Greg. They put me and him together. You know, and I think they put him there to feel me out, to see if I was somebody that would flip. And I think, and he knew that as long as he was alive, I'm not flipping. I mean, he'll kill my whole family.
Yeah.
And he couldn't tell me he was a rat. So I think I don't know why they put me with him. But then after they saw that wasn't working, they put me with Vic. Then they send me back to where I belonged with Allie Boyd, Bobby Zam, Richie Fusco, the Russos, the guys that I was on the indictment with, you know? And then that's where Allie Boyd told me him and his father knew about Greg for 20 years, you know? And it just all started falling apart. It all started falling apart. But yeah, so no, some of the guys on the other side, they all felt the same way. Let's just try to put our heads together now, make peace. You know, how much worse could it get?
Yeah.
That was the sentiment for most guys.
Right. Now, I want to turn to your life after prison. You're no longer a part of that life.
Right.
Once you're released, did you struggle about, which direction to go in your life?
No. The reason is when I didn't go into any program or anything like that because I told him, I says, I'll be safer on my own. I says, my main thing was bringing out the corruption and the corrupt agent. Okay. So in my eyes, at that time, the FBI hated me more than a lot of my own friends because me bringing that to the table only helped everything. Not that I'm looking for a pass because I'm not supposed to take that stand. I'm not supposed to talk to the government. I broke the rule. All right. But I don't regret it after finding out about Greg and that they all knew. And that when I read the summation that Allie Boy wanted his lawyer to read, that the whole war was Greg and his guys. He didn't mention me. He didn't say Larry. But by that time, the jury would know that Greg's guys were Larry and Jimmy. All right. So Greg and his guys, the whole war was theirs. So they would, there was no, that's what I'm saying. So I took that knife out of my back. Okay. And moved on. So when I got out, the only place I could go was where my family was because I had a bed. They want to know where you're going to sleep. They had a job lined up for me. So I knew I wouldn't have to go stealing or anything like that. And they couldn't say no. So I wound up in Florida. Okay. And I had a very supportive, loving family. Okay. So I didn't need for anything. I had food. I had a bed. I lived there. I did get a job in a gym. Well, I actually had two jobs, one in a gym and one driving a van that took old people to an old age facility every day. It was 2 hours, like a school bus, 2 hours in the morning. So I had the rest of the day to do the gym stuff. Then I was working at a hotel, at a resort, one of the biggest resorts on Cocoa Beach. And I was doing activities because of my training background. I was working in the gym, doing activities for people in the gym, by the pool, whatever. Eventually, there was a spot that opened up for a manager of one of the divisions. It was called the referral department, one of the departments. And I took that job and I killed it. I got a good salary. I got bonuses. So now, but I was still working the gym. Obviously, I left the bus company. And I just built up a good foundation, and the gym led me to my own gym, led me to my now wife, who, together with the company she was in, we had a contract through my gym to test every potential Border Patrol agent. This was $1 million company. Not that I made millions, but it was lucrative for everybody from the company down to my gym. It was a good 2-year run for me. That enabled me now to eventually to get a bigger gym. I had a small gym. My first gym was a small gym. That's where I met them. I trained the people in her company. And then I was able to get a bigger gym. And it was impressive enough that I wound up with that contract. And we had to travel the country. I had to go to Texas. I had to go to California, all the border patrol, all the border places. So all those guys you see on TV now at the Border Patrol, a lot of them came through my school. We had to test them. And you know, and I trained literally 6 o'clock in the morning, not nonstop, but till 9 o'clock at night. I had martial arts classes. I had cardio classes. I was a workaholic. You know, I kept, you know, they say, what do they say? An idle mind is the devil's playground.
Yeah.
I didn't have any time for that. I was busy with good stuff. And, you know, and then, like I said, the book and the movie stuff came along, and it enabled me to put other people in, you know, to run my other companies and businesses. And, you know, I could focus on that a little bit, and I did well with that. And like I said, now I'm putting a lot of time into the sports business, the consulting. So, but yeah, I had my good start was that I had the family there. A lot of guys come home, they don't have their families anymore. Like Greg Jr., you know, he had some family, but, you know, his mom and dad were gone. Obviously, the father was gone, which is probably not a bad thing, but his mom was gone. That hurt. And we're friends, and I do everything I can to help him, you know, both financially and you know, what's the other word? Just support whatever I can do to help him. He's on the other side of the state. And when he first came home, they says, make sure you just don't get together. But now it's a little looser. And I, you know, as long as he tells them he's going to come to have dinner or whatever we're going to, you know, so we're very close again. And, you know, I do what I can to help people in that position.
Gotcha. I've heard you say that you've been working with Nick Pileggi on a screenplay. Is that the plan to make a movie about your life?
Well, I started with Nick Pileggi a while back, and my producer, Joe, wound up bringing Terry Winter, who does Tulsa King, Boardwalk Empire, Sopranos. He's like the #1 mob guy now. But all of that, like being with Scorsese and De Niro, those guys are so busy. They have literally dozens and dozens of projects in front of them. So if they sign on, you're stuck to their schedule. It could take 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know, we do have Terry. He did write it. Okay. But he's on a Tulsa King. Who knows how long that's going to be going. Nick Pileggi was the first thing he told me when I met him, and De Niro sent me to see him because they had a plan. He told me, Larry, kiddo. He calls me kiddo. Don't forget, Nick Pileggi's about probably 94 now. Okay. He told me, you wrote a mob classic. That was his words to me. De Niro said the book was terrific. And he asked me 3 times if I did it myself. I said, I did. I wrote the book. I was in college. I know how to write. You know, so I met, you know, Armand DeSante, big fan of the book. We became very good friends. He would love to be part of it. He wrote a great testimonial on the last page of my book. You could read it. I think you probably saw that.
Yeah, I have the book somewhere. I should have set it up, but it's a great book.
Okay. That's all right. But I'm saying, so we have a lot of people that are willing and they're there and they're supporting. But the bottom line is, I think I wrote the best script because there's no need to dramatize anything. And a few times I saw these brilliant writers, you know, they want to add things, but I'm too well known. The story's too well known.
Yeah.
To add something that is just for shock value. You know, it's unnecessary. There's enough of everything. There's enough violence. There's enough sex. There's enough of an intriguing story. And realistically, there's all the things you want, trials and tribulations. There's Terry Winter said he would have no problem having the audience like me. And that's very important. Think of The Sopranos. Nobody didn't like Tony. Everybody loved Tony Soprano, you know, and he was this crazy, vicious, nutty guy.
Right.
So, you know, will it happen? I think it will. Who knows when the stars are going to align, but there's a lot of heavyweight names. There's my producer, Joe Paletto, has money to put in the right conditions. And he's offered it, and he's been very, very giving. He signed on a lot of people in my circle that had books, including Greg Jr. You know, so we'll see. I'm not going to stop trying. And if it happens, great. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world because again, I've been an earner my whole life, and I don't need that. I would love it. I would love to, tell the story because it's interesting, it's informative, it's educational. It would be, what's the word? Entertaining. I mean, I would watch it even though I know the story, So I think it'll happen. We'll see.
Yeah, I think it would make a great movie. I hope to see that in the future. Speaking about movies, you were a consultant and had a role in The Irishman with De Niro and Pesci, and I think Pacino was in there.
Yeah.
That must have been an incredible experience. Can you talk about that and also being a consultant and what that means?
Well, yeah, it was a great experience. And let me tell you this, even though I had a small part, we filmed the part about 40 times. And my wife got to watch through Scorsese's camera a couple of times. He was really a sport about that.
It's a great scene, the way it follows you through there.
Yeah, it got edited way down because if in the true story, he had Albert Anastasia jumped up and ran to the mirror. He didn't realize he was disillusioned, and he saw the people in the mirror with guns. So he ran to the mirror. So the mirror broke. And that's a difficult scene to make look real. And the death scene after, so they cut it down, but whatever. But what I was saying is I had to go to a tailor in Manhattan, perfectly fit clothing. They actually made me wear a t-shirt underneath. I don't wear t-shirts underneath, even in a suit. And I said, why are they wasting money on a t-shirt? It's so stupid. Because I got this thing buttoned up. I got a hat on, a suit, an overcoat, the socks. Everything had to be perfect. The hat, as a matter of fact, when Scorsese came, he didn't like the first hat I had on. They made me switch it for one a little bigger, But anyway, it was incredible. I had to sit with De Niro. The first day I sat with him, he had an hour. He told me. It was 12 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, he was still sitting there listening to me. And I asked him a couple of times, Mr. D, I says, am I talking too much? And he says, no, keep going. And he's just sponge, taking it all in, getting my little ways, my idiosyncrasies. And the only reason it stopped, and then I was with him several times after, but this first time is the main time, it was because he had to pick up his daughter at school. So he had to get out of there, and he was already late, but it was funny. So there was probably a dozen things that I spoke to him about, and I read for other parts. And I saw the parts, they made me read different things. And the people that wound up getting those parts, they used a lot of the words verbatim that I said. And I saw the script originally, and I saw that they changed a couple of things they did. He asked me once how Greg would put a guy at ease if he knew he had to shoot him. And I says one of his tricks was to sneeze or cough and grab his handkerchief out of his pocket. And then when he put the handkerchief back in, he'd come out with the gun. And he did that in the movie. There was a line where I said, this Sharon, when he walks into a room, they part the whole center of the floor for him. And I threw in, like Moses at the Red Sea. They put that in the movie. Little things, but there was about 12 of them. Yeah. I told them how to get, we got rid of weapons. And all those things add to reality, how to make it real. And there's a couple of things on the little scene I did that weren't directed, but Mr. Scorsese, or Marty, he wants you to call him, said to me, why did you do that? I says, well, the first time I had to do something with Greg, he held me by the arm, and walked me in like a team. He didn't want me to panic, I'm here, I'm right here with you. So I grabbed my pal Craig, he's my dear friend now, who was a fellow hitman, and he told me afterwards, when you did that, I got all this adrenaline in me, So it made the scene look better. And the other thing was I took a look over my shoulder. We all look like I'm going to take a quick peek to make sure there's not a cop standing there or, somebody following me in. And those are the takes that made it, So it's an experience, but I can understand why they need us. And he likes to bring people in Scorsese, because a lot of the stuff you can't use the word use. In my book, my first editor, the person that was editing for me, kept changing use to all of you. I says no, and De Niro says no, and then Scorsese, yo, you gotta have use in there. You gotta have use. That's how we talk in New York, Brooklyn, things like that. So he likes to have that real where you're not acting.
Yeah, it's authentic.
And I remember they all said how great this and that, and I just remember telling them, just don't call me for Hamlet. I could play corrupt cops. I could play ex-gangsters. That's all easy. So
yeah,
but it was a great experience.
Yeah. Well, man, you've done a lot of really cool things, man, and a lot of positive things since leaving that life.
Yes.
And I'm glad we were able to get together to do this part 2 because, everyone, myself included, loves hearing the Mafia stories and stuff. But it's good to put a little bit of attention on guys like yourself that have done positive things since leaving that life.
Well,
and
hey, listen,
so I'm glad we did this.
I want to say something. I did positive things even while I was in the life. I was still coaching kids basketball. I was even during the war. I was still doing some good things. So, but thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Right. Yeah. So where can people go and get a copy of your book?
I mentioned it earlier. I'll mention it again. It's a website because I did it all myself. I didn't go to any big publishing companies. I have a printer that prints them out. It's www.larrymazza-thelife.com. I still sign every book that I send out. Eventually, hopefully, if it becomes a movie or an episodic series, we'll sell so many books that I can't sign them anymore. But right now, that's my little thank you to people that buy it. And Inside Straight, if you're in the gambling business, or you're a gambler, or you go to these DraftKings places, it's worth it. It's only $49.95 a month, and there are specials for seasons. But you get information. I mean, last week I had a night we went like 9-2. The next night 11-1. There's also a lot of nights we go 50-50. There's no guarantees, but I can guarantee you this: you'll do better if you're a player following Inside Straight, the information and the knowledge and the data that we use, than if you try to do it yourself.
Gotcha. All right, Larry. I
right.
appreciate it, man. You have a fascinating story. Thank you for coming back on the channel and speaking with me.
Well, hopefully I see you again and we do it again. Just let me know.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Thanks for checking out this video. Be sure to get a copy of Larry's book. Check out his website, InsideStraight.com. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and keep following American Made. I appreciate it.
God bless.